For the record, it's 2:30 in the morning.
We're overrunning like Paul Joyce on a studio session, aren't we?
Yeah, we certainly are.
Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of season 18, talking about Who. I am P-Bal and I am joined today again by...
Hello, I'm still James.
And hello.
You've forgotten who you are, Jason.
Jason. Just letting it hold there, James, for you because it's good to have some time in the limelight.
Oh, were you waiting for a caption to come up? Was that what the pause was for?
That's what I was waiting for. I was just I was allowing the technical side to be able to do their stuff for us magically.
Well, that's lovely. Scores last time came in thick and fast, and we gave The Leisure Hive 17.5, Meglos 10, Full Circle 16.5, and State of Decay 23, my playing age. So Orcon and Camilla are going to join me again in giving scores for the last 3 stories. And we head to the Warrior's Gate. So who wants to have a bright white backdrop and walk around a bit for me?
Well, I don't quite know what to say. We're still trapped in E-space, so we're back in this second part, and we're still trapped in E-space. The Doctor's looking for a way out, but will everyone leave with him? All I can say is the gateway will present itself. And as I'm sitting watching this story, I'm also looking for a gateway to present itself because, quite frankly, Meglos was an interesting story. This story is, well, it just lacks something again, doesn't it? We're sort of a pitchy high, pitchy low sort of season we're on here. There's an intriguing start to this story where you've got the spaceship trying to escape from nowhere. And you know, you've got some great guest cast again. You know, the spaceship set is brilliant. You know, little touches like Kilroy was here, spray painted on the set. But oh my good Lord, what were they thinking about with that white background to the nowhere expanse? I can see why they were trying it, but oh my word, how does that jar against this story? It absolutely plays against it. I think the little bit of a script that lacks some pace here from Stephen Gallagher. And I've got to say, just the way they have tried to visualize this story for me lets it down in spades.
Are you not a fan of dull space? I mean, null space. So you're not a fan of null space?
I'm not a fan of the Blue Peter cyclorama with a castle set built in the middle of it, no.
I do get what you mean. We've gone from N space to E space. Now we're in null space, which is just nothingness, like you say. I really struggle with this story as well, especially after the sort of, you know, the high camp and sort of drama of the previous one. And I've seen this several times, and I'm still not entirely sure I understand exactly what's going on with the mirrors and the Tharals and the time winds. And K9 has this time had his memory wiped, so he's not blown up this time, but he's had his memory wiped by the time winds, I believe, which can only be rectified if he goes through the mirror to the side. Yeah, and the fact that Romana just decides, I know she doesn't want to go back to Gallifrey, but she just goes off with Laszlo. It's like, oh, here's a hairy guy, I'm going to go off with him. I find it really weird. It's kind of like, okay, we know that Lala's leaving. I think, you know, we've mentioned that it's not her favorite story. It's kind of rushed towards the end. I feel there's loads of stuff that they're exploring around, you know, who's the real bad guy, because you've got the Tharals who had human slaves, so they built the robots which sort of overthrowed them. But I find it really difficult to sort of pin my badge to, here's the good guy, and here's who I want to root for. Later on it's a little bit more clear, but yeah, it's Graham Harper's first directorial
he steps
story.
He steps in to help Paul Joyce, really, because Paul was just a little bit inexperienced with TV, as it transpires, and also had quite a bit of a hand in the script. It comes across, I think, it's a troubled production, this one.
Yeah. And this is the story that was originally going to be some sort of political thriller where Romana went back to Gallifrey and ended up staying. So she got recalled. And I think it was called like Sealed Orders or something, the original story, where she was going to go back and there was going to be this sort of political drama and she would stay at the end of it. But what you get, I don't know, it's kind of a throw together of things that really, for me, falls tremendously flat. And it's the end of a trilogy. It's supposed to be this big build-up to K9 and Romana leaving, but I don't feel that build-up. I just feel let down, really.
I think I disagree with both of you, actually. You get the full circle where Lala sort of sat in the bush, I'll go back to Gallifrey. I mean, quite why the Time Lords took so long to decide they wanted to speak. I suppose they couldn't find the TARDIS necessarily because they had the randomizer on up to that point, maybe.
They'd got rid of the randomizer in the first story of this season, haven't they?
Mm-hmm. So like switching your phone on when you've been back from holiday, all the bips came up and Gallifrey were like, can we have Romana back now, lovey? No, I like it. I like that kind of bleak, that the whiteness of that kind of that opaque thing of that this is the gateway between this is. I like that. I like the starkness of it, and I like Paul obviously loved doing the photography, the black and white photography. I think it's beautiful imagery. I think the fact that he was so focused on the imagery was where the problems lay, and that he wasn't willing to, just do a solid job. He wanted to create something bigger than Doctor Who was going to allow him to. Even down to the sets, there were problems with the sets being shut down from not being safe because they were multi-tiered. But I think there's a nice build to Romana going. I think the scene, as 'twere, where the Doctor chucks K9 out and says, "You're the noblest Romana of them all, Tarala." I get that, and I think that's basically the Tom thing again. It's what they tried with Sarah Jane, where it's like, let's play against this, because if we stand there and go, this is really emotional that you're going and blah blah blah, and so they play a bit too far against it, where it's a bit more like, I'm stopping here with beardy chops. But it's nice though, because then that's her USP, is that she's going to free the Tharals on other planets, and she's off to have her own spin-off series somewhere. And there is a lot to really like in this. The Tharal design, between June Hudson's costume design and Pauline Cox's makeup, the Tharals look incredible. I mean, they don't look like silly lion creatures. They are very realistic. There's a lot of individuality on the faces. Mm-hmm. David Weston gives an incredible performance through all the makeup. And I think Clifford Rose is probably one of the best guest performances that you get in the series. He's incredible. He's an incredible actor. And I think possibly because this story isn't something that's talked about or well regarded, maybe people don't necessarily praise that enough. But I think he's incredible. Kenneth Cope, amazing. Again, slight sadness, I suppose, that the part isn't bigger, but he does a lot with what he gets. And I think, kudos to him on that point. There's a lot. There is a lot I really like about this. And I mean, back to the too frightening for the kiddos thing. The bit where the Tharal, who is Jeremy Gittins of Keeping the Process, electrocutes, and the guy dies with his eyes open. It's quite brutal for a Saturday tea time. No, I like it.
I feel I can legitimately then wave my Marmite in this story.
Oh, God. No. I'll just say I hate it, just so you can put your Marmite away.
I absolutely agree with you about Clifford Rose. I think Rovik is a great character. And Kenneth Cope, For me, always going to be a massive fan, because I absolutely adore him as an actor. He's been in many things that I've enjoyed over the years. And I think he worked with absolutely everything he got. And you could just see that sort of style coming out there. And I do think there's a good story underneath this. I think I'm probably allowing the visualization for me, because if you look back at the richness of something like State of Decay, go back to the Leisure Hive and, the set on Argolis and the way it's filmed, there are many redeeming features that have helped for me to appreciate stories more than this one, I suppose. And I am that sort of visual. I am somebody that relies on visuality during a production. So it's gonna naturally drag my interest down when it isn't well presented. I can imagine that this being tremendously executed, crisp, clean visuals, really realizing those sort of photographic type scenes. I think it would probably help me to understand that story narrative that's running underneath. I think, and I think, yes, I'm being distracted a little by the poor production values. But I don't get some of the story either. So that's pretty much my story on this one.
I don't know whether does it really lack visual. I mean, the banqueting, when it goes from being a lively fruit-filled proper banquet, and the multi-layer of the gallery above it and all that stuff, and then it cuts to the cobwebbed and decay and all that stuff. The cliffhanger where the Gundams come running in, the axe and smack that through, that's all great. I think it's a beautiful visual. The ship as well, as I said, the health and safety board and all that, but the multi layered ship, the gantries and the steps, and I like, and there's the contrast to the industrial ship against the sort of Gothic gateway, and I suppose things have been tweaked and touched usually for these things, but there's the sort of slight flaring on the sort of backdrops, the green screen and stuff to get the white behind, but I think visual, and it's an interesting, and there's a lot of unusual visual, and wow, that works. I like that.
They do. There are some, when Romana and the Tharol walk through the mirror, and then you've got this sort of black and white world where they're sort of walking along. There are some, we talked about other stories where they're trying to push the boundaries and they're trying to do something different. And that's fine, and some of the visuals are good. And you're right, there are some, when they swap between the banquet scenes, when you've got Romana shouts out, Doctor, and things change. But I find the whole time twisty mirrors thing still confusing, and I've watched it dozens of times and read about it, but I still find it a bit of a hodgepodge of ideas. And don't get me wrong, I don't hate this story. I just struggle to understand it. And there are some really good performances in it, but I don't know. I think I really like Lala, and I think she's a great Romana, and I feel she should have had something bigger as her send off, and she has gone on to do other things. And the Doctor even says, she's broken the laws of time because she's going Time Lords, because she's going to go and interfere and everything, which is of course exactly what he does. So you do have that sense that she's learned from him, and she's now the one that's on the run from the Time Lords and doing what she wants to do. But I don't know. I just think I'm maybe a little bit more emotionally connected to her to want her to have a big moment.
But there's not necessarily a thing in that era, is it? Mary goes. I mean, Mary just leaves, and she doesn't regenerate. There's nothing to do with Mary going. Louise just turns around and marries the nearest guy behind her. Liz, he just does I've got to go to Gallifrey, sorry love. I mean, having had the Joe Grant thing is 6 episodes building. From that first episode, she's going, and you're on the sort of journey with her. I mean, again, then you take that back another one. Liz goes, she doesn't. I don't know whether that was such a a thing, if that makes sense,
Hmm.
for the production. I suppose the next exit that we probably get companion-wise is Adric, and that is a huge thing. I don't know. I get it, but I don't know whether it would be within the character to sort of be stood there sort of crying, saying, so sad that our journey's at an end, or,
It comes very abruptly in the storyline, though, so you absolutely have no... I mean, again, it is very similar to the Sarah Jane exit, because, that scene is written in right at the very end. You don't see it coming, whereas you do with the Joe Grant stuff, as you said, it's 6 episodes to build up to it. There are some redeeming features in this story, and it's not all doom and gloom as I've painted out. I think there's a terrific scene where the Doctor is sort of fighting the skeletons in the armor, and I think that works really well on a lot of levels. I agree with you. The visuals in the banquet, where you get to the cliffhanger and they burst through the door and they chop the table and it all goes to the sort of cobwebby type part, works. But for me, these are few and far between in this story, and isn't enough to lift my engagement in it, because I'm already disengaged, probably from a visual perspective, and from the fact that it's probably not the paciest story that I've seen in the history of Doctor Who.
What does Adric do in this story?
I think the time winds have just taken that answer away.
I like these time winds.
He gets to be the benefit of that really weird moment where Romana says, if there's a problem, I'll do this.
Yeah.
She'll vogue for him. And it's like, it's not exactly a subtle signal, love. Do you want to just pull your ear or something? It's like, no, I'll do this and it'll all be fine. It's like, yeah. No, he hides under a bit of tarpaulin and keeps out the way, doesn't he, really?
It does. I'm looking at my notes going, there must be something that Adric did in this that was noteworthy, but it doesn't, there's not really much. He kind of blends into the background in this story.
Because there's a bit, isn't there, on, because behind the sofa on the Blu-rays, they don't watch all of it, do they? They just watch selected bits. And one of them goes, oh, Adric's not in this one then. So it's like, so the half an hour or whatever that they've shown hasn't got any Adric bits in, because he doesn't really get involved.
Might be the version I saw.
Yeah, it's. I suppose. Yeah, I suppose I would have said it's because you want to give Romana a lot to do in her outro, but it's not like it's pertinent to her outro necessarily. It's still slightly sort of sciencey, kind of humour-free to an extent, isn't it? I don't think there's a lot of jovial bounce in it, but
it's not. Sorry.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, I mean, the spaceship blows up in the end, doesn't it? I mean, they try to destroy the mirrors and it bounces back and blows up the spaceship.
It's a great explosion, isn't it? The ship exploding is a great effect.
Well,
Yeah.
Jason's the expert on special effects. Go on, Jason.
Well, no, I thought it was quite well executed, actually, at the end there, yes.
Thank you very much, Shirley Ballas. Well, I mean, at risk of being the only advocate of it being quite a good story, are we going to head to a score on it then?
Yeah, go on then.
Go on then, James. Jason's gone to sleep. He's read his own scores.
I've read ahead.
Oh, what I would say actually was I was thankful for it at school, because I remember we did something once. It must have been science maybe now. It's been a long time. And they said, "Oh, can anyone explain this?" And I put my hand up and said, "Angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection." They're like, "Oh my God, this is a mathematical genius." And I said, "Oh, I've just watched Warriors Gate 7 times on my video player." Anyway, didn't work quite as well when we were all kept in after break because someone had stolen something. And I quoted Time of the Rani and said it was guilt by association.
Ooh.
That went down less well as a Doctor Who quote. Anyway, score, James, sorry.
Okay, so it is goodbye to Romana. It's goodbye to K9 as well. Sort of limping over the finish line rather than a massive flourish. So interesting concepts, not all of them that I understand or maybe appreciate as much as you do, but I did score it 5.5.
5.5. Jason, have you thought of what your score is going to be?
I know what my score is going to be. I think I've been very clear as we've come through this where I think about it. It is indeed, as James says, it's Romana's last story. It's the end of K9. It's the closure of the E-Space trilogy. There's some great guest supporting cast in this, but the story falls a little bit flat for me. However, there are some redeeming features. So for me, this is very much a 4.5 out of 10.
4.5?
4.5 out of 10. It's not my lowest score this season.
I hope the dragon gets you in the night.
I will no doubt get a little bit of hate on this, but you know, I can only score how I feel, and it's not the worst story I've ever seen. It's by far not the best story I've ever seen, and I do think that the score I've given it is justifiable given the comments that I've made during this segment.
I could feel the frost from his time winds, can't you, boys and girls? I'm going to give Warriors Gate 6.5. It's not the greatest thing. I think it's a bit above average. But, you know, I don't necessarily think anything in this season particularly is amazing. So Warriors Gate finishes on 16.5.
Ooh. I think you'll be feeling that's a little bit low.
Well, like also All Saints, never ever have I felt so low because we're about to head to Traken. We've got the Keeper of Traken. We've got the Keeper of Traken with us.
That's no way to talk about James.
Well, that's rude.
Only because I know he's pointing at me with that Keeper of Traken reference, that's for sure.
Right, who's going to
I'm just a little bit gutted that nobody's painted on their eyes.
If you angle your ring light properly, you can get a red ring light.
Yeah, if you go for it and go for the red ring light, I think you can do it.
Yeah.
It's one of those times when the ring light is dancing in the eyes, but we'll forgive it.
See, I mean, I should like the Keeper of Traken because it's like an adventure set at the garden centre. I mean, they brought the pot plants in for this one. Is it that slight thing that is it a bit bland? The interesting thing is because we talked about the theatrical nature of the performances in State of Decay. I think because everybody has got a sort of mock Shakespearean costume for this one, they all start delivering their lines in much the same way, as if this is a great production that we should all be revering. And I think you get some very, I think Sheila Ruskin is incredibly
yeah.
She does a lot of falls in a very kind of arms down way. Yeah. Which, do you know what, I always used to like this as a kid. I used to like the video and I used to enjoy this story. And as I've got older and more miserable, I enjoy it less. So I don't know what that is, whether I'm withering like a miserable old Melka. But do other people enjoy this story?
I quite like this story. And for me, there's a tonal shift between this and, we've just come out of the E-Space trilogy. We've got a little bit of a change. It feels, I don't know why, but it just feels a little bit different. I know we've got the introduction of Nyssa, For me, it's Geoffrey Beavers. I think Geoffrey Beavers as the master. I almost at the end, when he takes over Anthony Ainley's body, I almost don't want that to happen, because I think the sort of burnt to a crisp, evil, manipulative master that Geoffrey Beavers is such a wonderful character that you want to see more of. I think, the fact that he doesn't appear until much, much later. I mean, I know JNT then starts playing around with, anagrams of the master's name to try and disguise him coming back. But this is the start of the master's trilogy. So you've got 3 stories in a row where the master is the main villain. And I just think that the way that he's so bitter, and I love that character. And I wish that I know Big Finish have obviously picked up a lot of that, but I wish you'd got to see more of him, rather than just, I'm going to regenerate at the end of this story. Because I think there's something, we've talked about Anthony Ainley's master, and I don't necessarily like a lot of, middle of Anthony Ainley's performances were kind of comic book, super baddie. And you get a little bit of that by the time you even get to Castrovalva. I liked Anthony Ainley's final performances, when he's on the Cheetah Planet, where he's darker and more restrained and more evil. But Geoffrey Beavers has that straight away. He's desperately clinging on to life, and he is really he is really evil. He just wants to take the source. He doesn't care who he has to kill in order to get that, so he can use Traken as the middle of his new empire to run the universe. And I like that.
Yes, I've got quite a soft spot for this story. I liked it when I watched it the first time round, and I kind of still like it watching it now. It's not epic, but it's a soft, easygoing sort of story. Absolutely concur with you on Geoffrey Beavers' performance. It is absolutely on point throughout. There's a sinister without him over sinistering it, if that makes any sense at all. It does to me, may not to you. He has that edge in his voice that I think is absolutely perfect. He delivers it smack on. It's the reintroduction of the Master, a favorite villain of mine. So nice to see the return of the Master. But this has just got a nice pace. It's studio bound, but it's very, very rich. And that really suits the pace that this story's going at. You've got Cassia that's under the influence of the Melka. The Melka itself is you think it's just a statue. It comes to life, walks around. It's actually the TARDIS. There's a lot going on there. I think that John Black really did get the direction of this spot on for me. There's some great cast that are working alongside it. And of course, don't forget our very own Graham Cole, who is actually in that Melka suit. And always good to hear him talking about that. And there's a couple of really decent cliffhangers in this one as well, particularly at the end of episode 1, where they think it's the Doctor and Adric that are the menace, but actually the Melka's at the back of the room menacing the Keeper of Traken. The only one downside is that actually this season, again, this sort of must be a JNT thing, but anybody and their uncle can just get into the TARDIS. So the Keeper of Traken can just materialize in his chair in the middle of the console room, and in the previous story, they can come into the TARDIS and pilot things away. So it's kind of like, I do think we're getting a little bit to that point where anyone can fly the TARDIS. We talk about that a lot in our season 19 presentation. Great story, like this one, big soft spot for it.
I don't think I can agree with you about the pacing. I think it is basically a Sunday afternoon in a garden centre. It really is. Cliffhanger to part 1 where Melka does, "Hooey," nobody else sees him, and then he's off again, stomping away. It's like, no, nobody picked up on that, did they? And then there's the cliffhanger where Cassia says, "There we go, all done. He goes, no, love, there's another 2 episodes to go. And it's like, oh, God. I mean, basically, Cassia tells every single person she comes into contact that she's bad, she's evil, and they shouldn't trust her. And they still all go, who could it be? It's got to be Tremas. He's a rum one, isn't he? It's like, oh my day. And nobody questions the fact that she's walking around with a giant bloody collar on. Unless they're into S&M on Traken and it's quite regular, I don't get why nobody would have said, the big flashing collar on your neck, love. Is that new? Is that it doesn't match your ensemble? Oh, I agree 120%. Jeffrey Beavers, incredible. And because it's just the voice to start with, and that's just such power in that. And then when you do get to see him, I go on a limb, I say it's a better representation than the Deadly Assassin, because the Deadly Assassin is a bit kind of fisheye, you can't perform with it. Whereas this, you can get a bit of expression and there's a bit of, movement with it. And I agree in terms of, it's no disrespect to Anthony Amy, but kind of imagine if at the end of that, he'd just sort of absorbed Tremas and then been all right in himself. That would have been, because it's such a subtle, because Jeffrey's a very subtle actor, really, and that's how he's been a great character actor, because he's very subtle and controlled in what he does. Great must, and it's a shame that obviously this is his own TV outing. I mean, obviously he's done a lot elsewhere. It does. Do you not sort of?
It's a gentle pace. That's what I'm saying, though. It's not.
Yeah, but you said the problem with Warriors Gate was that it was too slow, and then you go into something else where you basically have afternoon tea halfway through episode 2, just to sort of pass the time.
To me, it suits this story better than it did the last one. The pace needed to be much more fast. It needed to be a much faster pace in Warriors Gate, because this had the potential of being quite action-packed. This doesn't need to be, I don't think. The story is crafted around it being a bit genteel in its approach. And I think it can wear the pace of it. Yes, it might be Sunday afternoon in the garden centre with tea and a lovely Victoria sponge, but I don't think this needs action-packed, boom, 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 boom. I think it's got its own pace. It sets itself.
I think it's not perfect. I'm not saying that this is a 10 out of 10 spoiler. No. I find Nyssa in this story, again, she doesn't immediately jump out at me saying, I really want her to be a companion. She's quite manipulative. She's constantly trying to bribe the what do you call them? The people that are looking after the fosters. She's constantly like, I'll give you a bit of something, and you can let me in so I can go and see the melker, or I can get She has the iron bonder. This weird thing, which is she can turn into a weapon.
That's nice though, because you get her shooting people in this, and the same way when she does it in Arc of Infinity, she's a bit gun.
Yeah.
Don't piss with Nyssa.
That should be a USP throughout.
And I think it gives Adric something else to do, because the relationship between the Doctor and Adric. This is sort of like the first story where it's just the two of them technically, as he is the companion, but it gives him something else to do. Nyssa's quite sciencey, quite brainy. They spend ages working on the source manipulator. It gives them something to do, and that sometimes that does feel like Nyssa's sort of role is to build something. Could you build a zero room cabinet? Could you go and build something that will destroy a droid or whatever? That's her role. Yes, it's a bit OTT Shakespearean. They're all like, "Woe is me! The keeper is dying. The flame is going out," and it's kind of like, all right. But it is for those faults, it is still just an easy watch. I think it is, it's a comfort blanket kind of story. It's not going to challenge you. It's not going to leave you with questions. It's just something you can watch and you can go, yeah, that's it.
The pace suits Tom at this stage. You can very much tell we're getting to the end of the era now, and you can tell that we're getting just about there now. And he's looking tired. He's clearly not been well through this particular season anyway. And, you know, you can see it in the way that he's characterizing the Doctor, I feel, at this point. There are some great moments, but I think, again, it sort of sums up what Paul said a little bit earlier, that he's a little bit divorced from it at this stage. He knows he's leaving. I don't think he was particularly happy that Lala left at that stage. And I think he's just ready. He's ready to finish it up now. And that pace suits this story as well.
I think, ironically, the bits where Tom comes alive are very early on when Dennis Carey's there as the keeper, because he's obviously still likes Dennis because he's a little old chap and he's had fun with him on Sharda. And I think there's obviously, you know, I mean, you've got that same chemistry, and all that sort of stuff. And that's where Tom's alive. I think thereafter, he sort of checks out. I mean, Anthony Ainley, I'm not sure about his Tree Mass performance, because I think you can almost tell he knows he's going to be the big master. So he's playing it a little flatter, just to be like, look at this. Who knew that Tree Mass could become the master? So I think you got Tom looking a bit bored. Mantiani's a bit flat, and it's just like, you know, if it's a comfort blanket for some people, that's lovely. I don't hate it. I'm not advocating someone to hate on it. I love the design of the Melkor. I love a lot of the visual. I love the costume design. I love, you know, Roger Lim's music. I think is really good on this one. I enjoy a lot of it. It's just, I wouldn't say it's a comfort blanket. I just say it's a bit background. That's not a comfort blanket. I'd like a bit more spark, a bit more wit, a bit more engagement when I watch it. I'd like to be into that, and I'm not there with it. And I agree. I think John Black's a great director. I think he does a great job directing this. I mean, as a story, it's a bit bland, isn't it? Really, people of the garden centre are about to have their Source manipulator blown up, and an old man in a chair is going to be replaced. You know,
a couple of names that were in the sort of pot for Cassia, which is quite interesting. Fiona Walker, who would be in it later on. Glenda Jackson, Joanna Lumley.
Sorry, can we just stop the song there?
What?
Glenda Jackson. I mean, I would love to have said Academy Award in England. Would you like to come and have done Cassia for 4 weeks? I could just imagine that dropping on the agent's desk. They're like, what now?
It gets better. Diana Rigg, Joanna Lumley, and Judi Dench.
Oh, they aimed low, didn't they? And the irony
Dench
being
with
that,
red eyes.
Sorry, Ms. Rigg. Just before we finish, could you just close your eyes for a minute? We're going to just draw on some red lines. That's incredible. I mean, the irony being this whole BBC pay structure thing as well, that people incrementally got more as they appeared and stuff. You know, I can't even imagine what they've had to have shelled out for Glenda Jackson. They'd have had to have done all this against the green backdrop as well, wouldn't they? Oh gosh. Well, yes, that's interesting. That's one of the odd sort of frailties of the thing, isn't it? Because Sarah wasn't going to be a companion, was she? She was a guest star, and they decided during it that she'd be great to stop on, which is why she was paid a lot more than the other companions, because of her BBC pay structuring. But it is interesting, because I don't suppose you necessarily pick up from this. I mean, at the end, when she's like, you know, where's Tree Mass? You don't think, oh, she's going to be back next week. You sort of presume that's it for her.
Yeah, so you have this sort of strange thing with Nyssa that she just appears. And I forgot how she gets, you know, how she becomes a companion until I rewatched this. And, you know, she comes by strange means. You know, we'll talk about this in the next story. She suddenly pops up and goes, oh, hi, you know, I'm here. But then you have this thing where she later on, you know, they were trying to write her out. So she effectively spent a story asleep while they were trying to sort her contract out. And then she became a full-time companion after that. So it's just sort of strange transition into the role.
I suppose they just. I think the thought was obviously the thought of bringing Leela or Sarah Jane back to bridge the gap. They thought, I suppose, the more companions you had in the mix, the more likely the audience were to react and go with it. It's like, I think the character sort of does have a little bit of alteration. I think from the story, from Traken to what you get going forward. There's a sort of, I don't know if she gets a bit more earthy, because she's obviously very Traken alien in this story, and I think she gets a bit more earthy when it comes to pairing her up with Tegan, and So, do we have any exciting factoids or further thoughts from Jason, who might have gone into tranquil repose on this?
I actually have nothing more to add to this story. I'll throw it to Stato in case he's got something.
Hey, you sound like Johnny Byrne at the script meeting.
Don't forget the Victoria sponge, lovey.
No, I've got nothing else to add on this.
Did anybody ever own a Dapol Melka figure?
No. I did see one recently though on eBay.
Very strange. Not to scale, is it? Anyway, let's go scoring then, boys.
Let's go scoring.
Go on, Jason. Let's wake up and have a score.
All right, I'm awake. I'm giving you the score. So I've already said I like the pace of this one. It might be slow for some. It's, I think, the right pace for this particular story. It's got a bit of everything. It's got the master returning. You've got skullduggery. You've just got a great pace story. I've got a soft spot for this one. I won't hold the score out any longer. I am going to go with a 7 out of 10 for this story.
Cave Warriors, Cave Warriors. Okay. Check on Asongu. Let's move on to James's score on the Keeper of the Garden Centre.
I am in entire agreement with Jason on this one, so I also scored this a 7.
Do you know what? It's times like this you want to go for that, and may my bones rot for scoring it. Do you know what? Yeah, I am being a little bit contrary here, and I am being a bit controversial, maybe. But I don't dislike it. I don't hate it as much as I've ribbed it here. But I don't really like it. Again, this is like my flat line on season 18 now. So I think it might be the third time I've done this now. Keeper of Traken, you could just keep cutting the same bit. Keeper of Traken, I'm giving 5.
Oh, this is consistent.
I am flatlining with season 18. Let's just hope it doesn't get worse.
Well, I think it's great that we have all got different opinions of these stories, and I think that's absolutely an okay thing to be. I think we shouldn't all like the same things, otherwise this wouldn't be a very good presentation.
But do you feel it's a little bit telling that we haven't had, I know we've got one story left, but we haven't had 10s or 9s? None of us have felt that strongly about any of these stories.
Yeah, it is odd, because usually I don't think we've always necessarily, when we've done the reviews, had a 10. We've had 9s and 10s.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We have still got one story left. It could all change. It's interesting that the reaction isn't necessarily hate, more sort of apathy. It's more kind of like, I honestly get what John Nathan was trying to do with the show. I get that he wanted to get away from the humor, and I can see that if you leave Tom on the trajectory that he was at with, Horns and Nymon and and all that sort of stuff, that you if you don't rein it in a little bit, you can just it just becomes a Morecambe and Wise show. But by the same token, I think if you just extract all of that, and that's my big problem, and it's possibly that it's the bid me thing that I don't like so much. That kind of, we're going to be serious science. This is a serious science show, which I don't know. Doctor Who's an action adventure show. I think it should be a good story. It should be an entertaining story. It should be something that engages you. And I think the trouble with some of these is that not that they're bad, it's just that they don't necessarily engage you in the way that they maybe should do, and some of the others do. Which brings us to the series finale, Logopolis.
Woo!
Oh, I thought someone might have invested in I was going to say poppers, but that's probably the wrong. What do you call those? The
Party poppers.
Party poppers. Yeah, Jason, don't get your poppers out.
No,
so this
entertainment.
This is the end, but the moment has been prepared for. Say, one of us had to say it.
Oh, yeah. You pinch my line.
It's like I read your script, Clifford.
Isn't it?
What do we think of the Logopolis?
Oh, okay. I will start. I mean, this is obviously Tom's last story. We've got the introduction of Tegan. This is the first full episode with Anthony Ainley's master as well. So we get to really see a little bit more of him. The story, I mean, we're in this master trilogy now, and I know we've talked about Castrovalva already. So this is the sort of one in the middle of this, where already Anthony Ainley's becoming this super villain, slightly OTT in a way, and having just gone from the previous version of the Master, which I really liked, it's really difficult to get on board, so quickly with the new Master. And you've still got this, the introduction of Nyssa into this, where she still thinks it's her father, she still thinks it's Tremas in some way, and you've got that overhang from the previous story. You were just saying about it being action adventure, and again we're very much into science, advanced mathematics. You've got the block, whatever it is, can't remember off the top of my head, the block
transfer computation.
That's the one. So really sort of quite sophisticated concepts. Admittedly, a whole load of men sitting in caves, replaced by dollies sitting in caves later on. So there's a lot of that sort of sciencey bit going on throughout the story, which I guess as a younger person watching that, didn't quite always get that. Didn't necessarily understand that. As an older person watching it, do understand it a little bit more, and how the Master hopes to sort of manipulate that. That being said, we're back to that sort of relationship with the Master, where the Master comes along and goes, "Oh, I've got a dastardly plot," and then the dastardly plot goes belly up, and the Doctor has to work with him to try and we're almost back to that sort of Delgado and Pertwee sort of thing where, oh, actually the whole universe is now imploding, so we better do something about it together. But Ainley's a little bit more of a slippery fish, and is like, well, if I can find a way of bumping you off as well, I will do. So it's an interesting story. There's some great. I love some of the characters. The Monitor character, is really good. Tegan's introduction at the beginning. I mean, poor Aunt Vanessa. I think she's straight away a strong character. She just spent a lot of time wandering around the TARDIS, or the Master's TARDIS, going, "Where am I? This is not Heathrow." And she's going to spend quite a lot of the next season doing exactly the same. But it's an interesting one. That's where I'm going to leave that point for now.
There's lots of things that make absolutely no sense. Or Master, people of the universe, please say, what are they doing? Are they texting you back? Every single planet in the universe now dropping you an email, or how's that work? Are they all on that? They're all on that frequency. They're all ready for your message, are they? What's that? That is rubbish. oh, what look, we've got to get rid of the master. What are we going to do? We're going to materialize under the Thames and fill the expanse of the TARDIS with the river. Just hold the door for a couple of minutes so it doesn't burst open too quickly. When he was sat writing, well, I've got to do serious science here, serious science. Well, no, Chris, no. That's just not a thing. That is terrible. Do you know what? I find this story incredibly difficult to sit through. I find it dry and I find it tiresome. I find very little in it that I can engage with or I can like. And basically, I'm with Tom at the end. I'm going to throw myself off that satellite dish so I don't have to be in Castrovalva. That is what I'm going to do.
Okay. And as I
I'll
said,
hold back a little bit on my thoughts about it.
as I said a little earlier, the opinions are great. This is great that we've all got different opinions. I'm going back to the 10-year-old me, and I pretty much have watched the entire run of Tom Baker as it's gone out on a Saturday night, 5:25, BBC Wales, no regional variations. I am a 10-year-old that is getting a little bit upset because the Doctor that I've essentially known for the time that I can remember the series is leaving, coming to an end. And I want that story to be epic. And the 10-year-old me, personally, did find that story fairly epic, particularly the regeneration and and it's a great regeneration, actually. This is where they really are putting some effort into it. And, this is the time where I think we talk about it in the season 19 one, where, you're taking 2 episodes to unravel the regeneration. We've led up to this one. It's going to be good when you get to it. And to be fair, it doesn't disappoint. You have all the returning sort of characters, if you like, from the era. And it feels quite nostalgic. And it covers what it needs to cover. He falls from a great height. He's broken. That's the Doctor I've watched for close to 7 years. And it's a change. And to be honest, I think I've already said in season 19, it took me probably a little bit of time to get used to the new Doctor because I was absolutely a Tom Baker fan. The grown-up me looks at this story in a slightly different way. And I can see both sides of where you guys are coming from with your comments. The story and the plot is not terrific. And to me, I always want the end of a Doctor story to be epic right across the piece. I mean, if you look at Planet of the Daleks, okay, it's 6 episodes. Okay, it's got, it's probably a little over long, but they indulge the Doctor as they come through it. And there's something there for everyone. This doesn't do that. There are some great iconic little set pieces in it for me. I love the TARDIS inside the TARDIS piece. So I sort of kind of love that whole sort of recursive thing that's going on. I'm a big fan of the TARDIS anyway. So for me, having TARDIS inside TARDIS was like, oh, that's great. And I still like it even today. And Vanessa's badly treated, I'll agree. The introduction of Tegan obviously into it. But not an awful lot happens. The Master's in the background. We go to Logopolis and we try and recreate the TARDIS with a new chameleon circuit. There's no real sort of feel for why we're doing that. Nyssa turns up. I don't know. So I've got to say that it's a story of 2 halves for me. I'm always going to be glued to the set for episode 4. I'm not necessarily going to be glued to the set for episodes 1 to 3.
I think, obviously you meant Planet of the Spiders. I knew you meant Planet of the Spiders, but if anyone else wants to write below, I knew you meant
Sorry,
Spiders.
that's exactly what I meant. Sorry, it was Planet of the Spiders. You're quite right.
I knew you meant that. I just didn't want anyone mentioning that you... Anyway.
No, sorry.
The thing with Planet of the Spiders, though, is that the build-up to that is that he's facing his fear, and basically his die is cast from the Green Death onwards. Everything thereafter leads up to that moment. He has to face his fear, and then when he's there, she's like, you're dying. I can feel you dying. It's horrible. It's quite a build. It's a really emotional exit. second Doctor, obviously he has his force to regenerate, and and then afterwards, Peter, when he has, he dies saving Perry by getting the bat milk and all that. Tom, the fourth Doctor, like probably the best Doctor, dies pulling a plug out the wall. Which, let's be honest with you, if the Master, his whole plan for universal domination hangs on that plug stopping in a socket, once the Doctor's dropped, can he just push it back in the socket and carry on? I kind of think, oh God, I get, and I'm not saying you're wrong in terms of your association of it, from watching as a child, but as a sort of end for the Doctor, he just sort of lets go, doesn't he? He doesn't fall so much as just, he sees a few, DVD flashbacks and then lets go. It's not. I think it's a really poopy end for. It would be almost better if he died, saving Tegan from dying the same way her aunt did, or something. It would just feel more heroic. I think Tom sort of says that he didn't like the fact that he just lay on the floor and he wanted to be a shoulder up, and he felt the whole thing was a bit flat and unheroic. And I don't like the payoff of the fourth Doctor. I think, especially, obviously the sixth Doctor just gets a bit battered about by an exercise bike and the Rani, but as a rule, they generally built to something in a proper way, and I think Androzani may be one of the better ones of those. But I just think Logopolis, he gets a terrible outro, really.
I have to talk about not the elephant in the room, but this white gentleman here, the Watcher. Any ideas? Because it's one of those things that when I watch this story, and I've read lots of different versions of, it might be a future.
It's a pre-Hartnell
Doctor is the latest one. There was a suggestion that it was a future Doctor that had come back to view things. That it was a shadow, a forefront of the regeneration. But then you've got the fact that this character, although you never see it on screen, talks to, the Watcher tells Adric what to do, that goes off and gets Nyssa, is quite sort of in the background doing all these little things. And I don't know whether it's because when they were writing the story, or when they were looking at it, they were like, how the hell are we going to get Nyssa here? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? How are we going to stitch all this together? I know, let's have someone mysterious who's only ever going to appear once. We never hear about the Watcher again. It's we haven't seen any other regeneration like this, and I find that really odd.
I strangely don't, as far as you do have those things where you have omens or portents of things that are to come or things that are to happen. So I can get that kind of vaguely paranormal projection of what's going to happen. I think that's what they're implying, isn't it? That he's a projection of what is to come. He's the portent of doom, isn't he? He's like a physical cloister bell, I suppose, just saying,
yeah.
I'm the ghost of your next self. Your time's up, mate. And that's actually quite a nice part of this. I mean, it's one of the only nice parts of us. I like that sort of doom, and it's the design of it. It's very much like the BBC Ghost Story for Christmas, The Signalman. It's got that same sort of horror to it. I mean, I suspect there are a lot of fanfics out there debating what the Watcher is or not, or you're just expected to go with this as he was the Doctor all the time.
Yeah. And then never mentioned ever again. You're just like, what?
moving along. She knew. Aunt Vanessa is an icon. I mean, she's an icon. Shame you can't actually buy the doll. I
put it in a lunchbox with a scientist and a policeman.
Tom Georgeson, I think, cruelly underused as just a police sergeant in a lay-by. I mean, Gordon Bennett. What was the? Having said that, they probably asked Ian McKellen and Derek Jacobi first, and they all said, "Do you know what? We're not going to the Barnet bypass that afternoon. Sorry."
Well, you say that. You say that.
Because Glenda Jackson turned it down.
Yeah. Michael Goff, Frank Windsor were names that they wanted to play Monitor originally, along with Peter Cushing.
Oh, but then John Fraser was a huge film star. He a gorgeous one at that. I mean, he incredible looking guy. And I love his performance in this. He has a very quiet, sort of serene presence, and I think he carries himself with more dignity than maybe the material suggests that he should. It's funny because sometimes I watch this and I find that Janet looks a bit nervy because it's her first story and she's finding her feet. But then I also watch this having done, and again, this is one of the sort of joys, I suppose, of doing these and watching everything in order. I found her energy coming in part one a kind of a lift, actually. It was a kind of like, crikey, this is a bit of an attack, which is missing maybe elsewhere. This is someone that's actually going for this and actually seems to be given a performance and sort of showing they want to be here and they want to be on screen and they want to be, a regular. Do we think it was with hindsight good to go with having the three, or do you think it would have been better if we'd have just maybe said goodbye to Romana in one and then straight in with Tegan as the?
Absolutely. For me, I think it's clear now that JNT had a game plan. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to set it up so that he could springboard out and really make his mark on the series once he could take it into the Davison era. So therefore, this entire season, to some respects, whilst it's respectful and exits Tom from it, it's building blocks for the future and his future ideas of what Doctor Who need to be. And as I've said in the season 19 video, you're starting to see that trait of what a brand manager. He brings brand manager to it because he starts to look at Doctor Who as a brand. And we said in the 19 video that we don't think three companions work, and I'm going to stand by that because I don't think they do. But he's clearly building it. I don't agree that we do it through this season. I think we should have just stayed with how we were, and Lara and Tom sort of exit almost simultaneously, give them a good build-up, a good story, could have brought the Time Lords in. We could have done all sorts of things here to have really played up for a proper end of season story. I don't think we should have built it here. I think we should have waited. That should have come into play through season 19.
I mean, they because of what the Master's done and the fact that sort of entropy is now set in, he destroys the Traken Union, as well as taking over Nissa's, father and killing him. He ends up killing everybody on Traken and, the whole of the system. So you're kind of like, you feel that the Doctor is now stuck with these companions rather than he's chosen them. Adric is now out of E-space, so he's got no family, he's got nowhere to go. Nissa is effectively now an orphan because her race has been killed off. And they just so happen to have picked up, a gobby Australian who accidentally walked into the TARDIS. So there's not a sense there that the Doctor's chosen the companion. It's not like they've had, a chance to sort of sit down and go, well, do you fancy coming with me for a trip around the universe? They kind of been engineered. They've kind of just been put there. And I think you're right, Jason, and we have talked about this on season 19. When I reviewed that, I was so irritated by the snapping and the arguments and the, just sort of teenage tantrums pretty much at the beginning of every episode. And I think at the end of this story, and it is kind of an iconic moment where he's lying on the floor, the Watcher sort of drifts into him and he, regenerates into Peter Davison. but you have these three companions around him that you're just thinking, what a motley crew. And then Peter Davison does this thing, in the next story where he's like, you'll be my navigator, you'll be the heart of the time. And you're thinking as the audience, oh my God, leave those three and go off and find someone else. Because
he does have the line in Logopolis, doesn't he, where he chooses to work with the master. He's like, well, when have I ever chosen my company? I don't want you, and I didn't want you. So I'm going to actually just pair up with the master right now.
Yeah,
I think individually, I think they're all fine, and I think maybe when it gets to Nyssa and Tegan, they work because there's a dynamic of the sort of the anger and the past. I think I like that dynamic. Maybe it's just difficult when you have a whole gang, and I especially it's sort of. I mean, in this serial, Tom isn't sparking off any of them. There's no semblance, I think, there of him connecting with any of these. There's a lovely comedy moment when Janet comes and demands to speak to the pilot, and Tom's sort of like, "Oh God," I like that fight, but you don't feel that he's bonding, because basically he's counting down the days to the party in the television centre, isn't he, in the exit. But it's a shame. But I think his mood, and I know he was unwell for a lot of this, but his mood's obviously affected, I think, by the styling of the show. I don't think the styling of this show suits the Doctor he made, and I don't think it necessarily suits the Doctor and Romana particularly well. They're very vibrant and witty, and this isn't a vibrant and witty series. It's not. That's not to say it's a terrible series. I mean, I've been given a lot of 5s out. 5, I would pains to say, is a flatlining average. It doesn't mean it's atrocious. It just means it's, as a Doctor Who story, it's fairly average. I just think that from the heights of where they were performing, not necessarily the story isn't better. I won't, I'm going to argument, but the performances for them and the wit and the sort of flavour of the previous year to have to be like, no jokes, it just makes this a bit of a trudge to get to the point where you can be like, this is the 5th Doctor and this is how the series is going to be. It feels like you're shoehorning what was there before into what you want to do, and it doesn't really fit. It's the wrong shoes for the wrong feet. I'll stop talking. That was quite a long one.
On a lighter note, there's a lovely little moment where they go into Romana's room and see her school uniform from City of Death. There's that throwback. But, as well as seeing all the companions and the enemies, later on in the pre-regeneration part. But, it's an interesting one because, again, I don't hate it, but I don't love it. And, I don't want to call it beige because it's not quite beige, but it's beige.
Mocha.
Yeah.
Stone. I mean, Jason's put his Marmite away, but a lot of people love this, and a lot of people were thrilled to see this at the BFI and on the big screen, and like, oh, look, it's a great story, love this. And so I can understand that there's going to be a lot of people out there going, oh my God, Jerry, whatever it is, nice. Yeah, I just think it fails on so many more points than it succeeds for me personally.
And I think the last episode is the standout in this 4-parter. I think the build-up, episode 1, apart from that dreadful sort of bit where they're underneath the Thames, the episode 1 builds well. I just think for a 4-part, and this is unusual, I think it just sags a little bit in the middle. It just hasn't got that sort of, it hasn't got what I expect for an end of Doctor story.
So I think we are, unless there are any last thoughts or inspirational facts.
No, I don't believe so. It was the last of Barry Letts as an executive producer. So, yeah, that was it. That was all I had.
So it's the end of the season. But okay, I won't keep doing that. Let's go for the scores. Jason, what are you giving Doctor Who and the Logopolis? Not Legoopolis, because you might prefer that more.
Well, Logopolis, absolutely. That would have been a great story. Look, it's an end of Doctor story. I was 10 at the time. I'm going to go back to being 10. I was very sad to see my Doctor effectively regenerate. It took me a while to settle that back down in season 19. It's a good story. It's not an epic. It's not a flop. It's certainly not Warrior's Gate or Meglos for me. It's got some interesting ideas, and it's got the introduction of another companion, and it sets the scene really for the JNT era. So with all things considered on Logopolis, and this might seem a harsh score, but it's not, I am going to sit in with 6.5 for Logopolis.
6.5, and he's worried that's harsh. Things might, I've just dipped into the future and you need to be prepared for the worst. James.
There's a 6.5 in there actually, because this is a regen story for me. And as I said, I've probably got my 10-year-old sort of head back on there. There's a little bit of nostalgia in this one for me as well. But yeah, I mean, originally I thought I'd be around a 7.5 on this, but I'm not. So it's a 6.5.
And I do get that, Jason. When it's your Doctor and it's the regeneration, there's always going to be something special about that. Whatever the story, it's that, you know, the emotional. I know we talked about season 19, but it's the emotional letting go of your Doctor. And for me, you know, Tom had been the Doctor for what, 7 years, and I wanted fireworks. I wanted there to be this huge thing. Which didn't quite pan out. But that being said, I did score it 6.
I'm going to do the drum roll as I total this up now. I really don't dig this. I don't dig it on sort of any level really. Yeah, I won't beat about the bush. It's gone below the flat line. The beeping is near stopping here. I'm giving Logopolis 3.
What? 3?
Because basically it seems I give bad scores to Doctor Who stories for Tom Georgeson.
We've all got different opinions. I absolutely agree. But I'm speechless with that one.
What? It's terrible. I mean, I have never, ever, ever enjoyed this story. I can remember having it on VHS, and I never used to put it. It was never one I put on. And sometimes it's because you don't like the regeneration the Doctor does. I just didn't like it. It's boring. It makes no sense. It's just full of I've said the nice bits previously. My summation of it is that I just don't like it. I mean, 3's still not nothing.
Jason's face.
No. Look,
You only gave it 6.5. So if you loved it that much, where was your 10 from Milan?
No, there's no 10 from me on this one. And you know what? I think, again, as I echo, we talked about this coming into talking about this particular story. We've all got a different opinion. And I think this season, everyone's got slightly different views. This isn't the greatest of seasons for me. And some of my scores have reflected that. There's been some good stories here, but there have been some weak stories in this season. And I suppose in some respects, it was still finding its feet. JNT taken over. He had some ideas. There were some teething problems. I think it hits its stride a little bit more in 19. No, I don't disagree with your score. Everyone's entitled to their own views.
Well, before I get any flashbacks of former companions, the rundown for season 18. Bottom of the barrel, 7th place, we have Meglos, Pity the Cacti, 10 points. 6th place, we have Logopolis, 15.5 points.
Ooh.
Jason, you can shake your head as much as you like. It ain't getting no more points.
I didn't think it would be quite that low in the final score.
Joined 4th on 16.5, we have Full Circle and Warriors Gate. 3rd place on 17.5, we have the Leisure Hive.
These are low scores, aren't they?
these are like sort of UK Spain televotes. These are. Our runner-up for season 18 is the Keeper of the Garden Centre, Talkin, on 19 points, which means, Jason, your hand has won the day.
Woo!
23 points for State of Decay means it is our season 18 winner.
Woo! And it's a good story, and I think it was certainly there in the top and deserved to be.
And I'm going to go and feast on the blood of the living. If nothing else, I like to bite. So thank you very much, Jason and James.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, thank you. Pleasure to be here again and to go through our own views on season 18 stories.
Right. Hope you all enjoyed that. I'm sure there'll be comments below. And we'll see you soon for another video. Bye-bye.
Bye.